News, I'm Mark Broom. Let's kick things off with a look at the day's headlines. His first taste of freedom in almost a year. Samsung Group's heir apparent Lee Jae-yong walks free after receiving a suspended sentence. Now that the senior executive of Samsung Electronics, the jewel in Samsung's crown, is out, what's next for the Korean tech titan? A 140-person North Korean cultural group will arrive in South Korea by sea in the coming hours. They will perform a couple of shows to celebrate the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. Plus, a record-setting day on Wall Street, but not in a good way. The Dow sheds more than a quarter of its gains since Donald Trump was elected president. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq are also slammed. Our top story this morning, though, Lee Jae-yong, the vice chairman of Samsung Electronics, is a free man today. He was released from prison on Monday after an appeals court suspended his sentence for his role in the sprawling corruption scandal that brought down the previous Park Geun-hye administration. For more on the verdict and Lee's reaction, Cha Sang-mi starts us off.
Once again, I feel sorry to everyone for not showing my best side. This past year has been a really precious time, a chance to reflect on myself. I will take a look inside and do my best.
After almost a year behind bars, Samsung Group's heir apparent Lee Jae-yong walked free on Monday after his original sentence was suspended. He was also reduced to 2.5 years, and he will spend 4 years on probation. The de facto leader of Korea's largest conglomerate had been sentenced to 5 years in prison in late August 2017 for giving $8.1 million to former President Park Geun-hye and her longtime confidant Choi Soon-sil, offered as a form of sponsorship for Choi's then dressage rider daughter Chung Yu-ra. A special prosecutor's team had demanded a 12-year jail term for the 50-year-old billionaire on the charges at the time. The appeals court, however, overturned the lower court's ruling and reduced Lee's sentence. The court said that Samsung hadn't made any explicit or implicit requests for government backing of a merger of two Samsung business units, a process deemed vital for his leadership succession and a charge of hiding assets overseas. 4 former Samsung executives also had their sentences commuted by the court. Lee was first indicted in February last year on 5 charges related to his alleged role in the corruption scandal, including bribery, embezzlement, and illegally transferring assets overseas. After the appeals court's verdict on Monday, attention now turns to the ruling on former President Park. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
So, with Samsung Electronics Vice Chair Lee Jae-yong out of jail now, the focus reverts to the Korean tech giant's future. Now that the vacuum within Samsung's leadership has been filled, our Lee Seung-jae reports.
Walking free on Monday, Samsung Group's heir apparent Lee Jae-yong. Now that Lee is out, Korea's biggest conglomerate is expected to make some major financial moves, but not before moving towards a more transparent management system. Dubbed New Samsung, experts believe Lee will push for more transparency in the wake of the bribery scandal and accept his past mistakes. This includes his plans for sweeping structural changes within Samsung. To resurrect Samsung's tainted image at home, the tech giant is likely to expand its corporate social responsibility programs in Korea. The company's corporate social responsibility unit, which is led by former Samsung communication chief Lee In-young, will roll out programs in tune with the Moon administration's shared growth policy. The move is seen as an effort to normalize ties with the new government, which has been pushing to reform Korea's all-powerful chaebol like Samsung, LG, Hyundai, and others. However, other experts offer a different view of what Lee might have in mind. They suggest Lee may distance himself from domestic involvement and rather become more aggressive in global mergers and acquisitions by engaging more with business leaders around the world and making more large-scale decisions. And for one, Lee could make some high-profile public appearances in the coming days, the most likely being the opening ceremony of the PyeongChang Winter Olympics on Friday, given that Samsung is a key sponsor and a global top Olympic partner of the International Olympic Committee. Not to mention Lee's ailing father, Lee Gun-hee, played a key role in PyeongChang's successful bid for the Winter Games as a member of the IOC in 2011. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now let's shift our focus to the interaction between the two Koreas before the PyeongChang Winter Olympics kick off here in the south in a few days' time. The North Korean cultural group that's set to stage performances in the south as part of a series of events to celebrate the Winter Olympics will arrive in the south by ferry, and they will arrive later today. Our Kim Yong-gil with the details.
On Tuesday, the leader of the Samjeon Orchestra, Hyun Song-wol, will lead the rest of the 140-member art troupe into South Korea by ship, using the eastern coastal route.
The North is using the Mangyongbong 92 ferry to come to South Korea. They will be using it not just as a means of transportation, but also as accommodation for the art troupe during the concert period in Gangneung.
Seoul's Unification Ministry spokesperson also said the North ferry trip to the south will be exempt from South Korea's 2010 sanctions, which banned North Korean ships from docking in South Korean ports.
When it comes to UN sanctions, we will closely consult with the international community, including the US, in order to ensure the move doesn't violate sanctions.
The 2010 sanctions imposed by Seoul on Pyongyang are to punish the North for its sinking of the South Korean warship Cheonan in March of that year. An expert on North Korea said the Mangyongbong ferry entering a South Korean port will not be a problem since Seoul's government has considered it an exemption to make the PyeongChang Games a success.
The North's Mangyongbong ferry will be used as accommodation during the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. We should approach it in a humanitarian manner. It won't be a problem to get understanding from the UN or the US.
In preparation for the North culture events, a 23-member advance team arrived in the south using the western land route on Monday morning. The 23 members arrived in advance to prepare for the concerts that will be held this Thursday in the Olympic host city of Gangneung and in Seoul this coming Sunday. The group brought musical instruments and other equipment necessary for the performances. Kim Yong-gil, Arirang News.
Now staying with the build-up to the Olympics, and Kim Yong-nam will lead North Korea's delegation to the PyeongChang Games this week. The 90-year-old, who is the North's ceremonial leader, will be the highest-ranking North Korean official to ever visit the South. The focus now turns to why he was chosen among the few candidates who were available, including Kim Jong-un's sister and his right-hand man, Choi Ryong-hae. For a closer look at the possible reasons behind the decision, here's Lee Jung-yeon.
With less than 5 days to go until the PyeongChang Winter Olympics kickoff, North Korea confirmed the attendance of Kim Yong-nam at the opening ceremony. The 90-year-old is North Korea's ceremonial head of state, who has been serving for 3 generations of the regime's founding dynasty, Kim Il-sung, his son Kim Jong-il, and his grandson Kim Jong-un. He has been the president of the Supreme People's Assembly since 1998, which according to the regime's constitution means he represents North Korea. He previously served as the Minister of Foreign Affairs. This won't be his first Winter Olympics, as he has already attended the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia in 2014. Before this decision was made, however, pundits have speculated the delegation might be led by Kim's right arm, Choi Ryong-hae. Experts' opinions differ on the main reason why Kim Yong-nam was sent over Choi Ryong-hae.
Kim Yong-nam is known to be a loyal bureaucrat of the regime who has long dealt with foreign affairs, so he hasn't been much involved in the domestic whirlwind of political games.
Neither Kim Yong-nam nor Choi Ryong-hae has strong political tendencies, although some might differentiate the two. The fact is, neither has the power to act independently.
They do agree, however, that Kim Yong-nam is the go-to official to represent the regime abroad.
At least by sending Kim Yong-nam, North Korea can avoid heat from the international community and avoid violating sanctions against the regime.
These sanctions refer to South Korea's unilateral punitive measures against the regime that ban financial transactions with Choi Ryong-hae. As for the other candidate, Kim Yo-jong, who is the current leader Kim Jong-un's younger sister, Experts say chances of her coming were slim to begin with, as choosing her may reveal their blood relationship that North Korean citizens are not aware of, not to mention her lack of experience in foreign affairs. Lee Jung-hyun, Arirang News.
Now, President Moon Jaein delivered a speech at the annual IOC General Assembly in Gangneung on Monday night, marking the start of a demanding schedule leading up to the opening ceremony of the 2018 PyeongChang Winter Olympics. That is going to happen on Friday evening. Our Blue House correspondent Hwang Pyong-so with the details.
President Moon didn't shy away from expressing his excitement over South Korea hosting the quadrennial event, speaking at the 132nd session of the International Olympic Committee in Gangneung, the joint host city of the 2018 Winter Olympics.
이제 4일 후면 그리스 헤라 신전에서 피운 올림픽 불꽃이 남북한 인구 7,500만 명을 상징하는 7,500명 성화봉송 주자들의 손을 거쳐 성화대에 불을 밝힙니다. 올림픽 정신이 높이 타오르고 세계인의 겨울 축제가 시작됩니다.
It has been a tradition for the IOC to hold its annual General Assembly in the host country of that year's Olympic Games. President Moon started his speech by welcoming guests attending the General Assembly, some 1,000 in total. He said it's a dream come true for the nation to be able to host the Winter Games in PyeongChang at its third try, after losing bids for the 2010 and 2014 Winter Olympics. He introduced all the preparations South Korea has made as the host country, such as presenting the world's first ever ultra-fast 5G network service, as well as launching the Dream Project initiative that introduces winter sports to young people living in countries that don't have winter weather. President Moon's speech reached its climax when he thanked the IOC for not only letting North Korea participate at the last minute, but also forming a unified team.
불과 한두 달 전까지만 해도 여러 나라에서 올림픽 안전을 염려했습니다. 북한이 평창 올림픽에 참가하고 남북이 단일팀을 구성하는 평화올림픽도 많은 사람들에게 불가능한 상상처럼 여겨지곤 했습니다. 그러나 염려는 사라졌고 상상은 현실이 되었습니다.
He said a safe and peaceful Olympics was the brainchild of the IOC in South Korea, and the PyeongChang Games will show to the world that sports can transcend all political and ideological walls and boundaries, which is, according to President Moon, the greatest value of the Olympics. The South Korean leader further reiterated that the successful hosting of the 2018 PyeongChang Winter Olympic Games will mark the start of establishing peace in Northeast Asia, as Japan and China are set to host the 2020 Summer Olympics and the 2022 Winter Olympics respectively. He vowed to work and cooperate with not only the IOC, but Japan, China, and all other countries in Asia. Hwang Pyong-so, Arirang News.
Now, another special guest will be coming to the PyeongChang Olympics, the father of Otto Warmbier, the American student who was jailed in North Korea and died last year upon his return to the US after suffering extensive brain damage. Fred Warmbier will be attending the Games as a special guest of US Vice President Mike Pence, with the planned visit aimed at intensifying pressure on the regime. Pence has said the North is seeking to use the Olympics to promote the regime's propaganda. He has also called North Korea's participation a charade to steal the Olympic limelight from the South. One of Pence's aides says the US Vice President is expected to point out the reality of the oppression in North Korea by a regime that has enslaved its own people. The top nuclear envoys of South Korea and the United States met in Seoul on Monday to discuss North Korea's participation at the Winter Olympics here in South Korea and other issues concerning the Korean Peninsula. They said they were satisfied with how events were unfolding, but more needed to be done.
Our joint efforts to make the PyeongChang Olympics an Olympic of peace are making good progress. With all this, I look forward to having in-depth discussion as to how to move from here beyond the PyeongChang.
On Friday, I met with Unification Ministry officials. So we had good talks, and I think everyone was happy at the level of cooperation, collaboration between U.S. and South Korea leading up to the games.
Seoul's foreign ministry said the two envoys pledged further cooperation with countries like Russia and China on dealing with North Korea and promised to continue working closely together to try and convince the rogue state to, quote, make the right choices. Later, Lee also held a phone conversation with his Japanese counterpart, where they also reiterated the need to continue efforts to bring North Korea back to meaningful dialogue. And inside North Korea, signs of a possible shift within its power structure. South Korea's intelligence agency says Hwang Pyong-so, who is the head of the military's General Political Bureau, may no longer be the regime's second most powerful man. Oh Jung-hee with more.
The man who had been considered the second most powerful person in North Korea appears to be so no longer. South Korea's National Intelligence Service said Monday at a parliamentary briefing that Hwang Pyong-so, who was the director of General Political Bureau within the North Korean Army, has been dismissed and is now receiving so-called ideological education. The post is now occupied by Kim Jong-gak, former Vice Minister of the People's Armed Forces. According to the NIS, several more others in the bureau, including its vice chief, have also been dismissed or even killed. This after the North's ruling Workers' Party of Korea held a rare inspection of the Bureau for 3 months starting last October, citing what it called the Bureau's, quote, impure attitude. The inspection was the first of its kind in 20 years. Experts believe Hwang Pyong-so had been in a power struggle with Choi Ryong-hae, the vice chairman of the ruling party's Central Committee.
Having Hwang re-educated on the party's ideology and making him write self-reflections can't really be seen as purging him. There's a high possibility he could be put back in power. I'd say that Hwang was temporarily pushed away in his fight for power with Che.
The regime's leader, Kim Jong-un, has not engaged in any military activities yet this year. His 6 public appearances so far, half the number at this point last year, were focused on visits to private facilities. But the South Korean intelligence agency noted that out of several underground tunnels at the North's Punggye-ri nuclear test site, Tunnel 3 is always ready for a nuclear test. The agency is also keeping a close eye on the February 8th military parade, as it could reveal a wide variety of its missiles. According to the NIS, the regime saw the largest trade deficit in its history in 2017 of almost $2 billion due to UN sanctions. It stole tens of millions of dollars worth virtual currency by hacking South Korea's cryptocurrency exchanges and launched cyber attacks against Seoul's security agencies, defense firms, and anti-Pyongyang organizations. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Now, there was a major bloodbath on US stock markets on Monday. Stocks on Wall Street plunged, continuing their huge fall from last Friday as a pullback from record highs deepened and investors grappled with rising bond yields and possible firming inflation. Analysts say the market's unease was potentially linked to the new Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, as fears that rising wages and higher inflation could prompt the Fed to raise rates more quickly than market expectations. The Dow tumbled nearly 1,600 points at its lowest point, the biggest intraday point drop in history, before closing 1,175 points lower, or 4.6%, at 24,345, as you can see. That slide was the worst single-day drop in points since the global financial crisis in 2008. The S&P 500 also tumbled over 4%, and the Nasdaq dropped around the same. The shockwave is being felt in Korea this morning as well. The benchmark Kospi opened the day 2% down, and the secondary tech-heavy Kosdaq, that was down over 4% at 821. Now for a look at stories making headlines around the world, and we're going to start with the political unrest in the Maldives. The government of the island nation declared a 15-day state of emergency on Monday amid the bitter standoff between the president and the Supreme Court. For more on this, let's turn to our Noah Aram. So Aram, what exactly has led to all this unrest in a country considered by many to be the ultimate paradise?
Well, Mark, the Maldives has been plunged into chaos in recent years amid a crackdown on dissent, with President Abdullah Yamin Abdul Gayoom jailing almost all of his political opposition since he came to power in 2013. The crisis was exacerbated last week when the Supreme Court surprisingly ordered the release of the imprisoned opposition leaders, as well as for 12 lawmakers to be reinstated. That would restore an opposition majority in Parliament and potentially create a platform for impeachment. It also threw out a trial against former President Mohamed Nasheed, the country's first democratically elected leader, who was controversially convicted of terrorism in 2015 by the Gayoom regime. Opposition supporters have staged street protests lobbying the government to obey the court order, but an infuriated Gayoom eventually declared the state of emergency. The move gives him sweeping powers to make arrests, search and seize properties, and restrict freedom of assembly. Hours after the emergency was declared, soldiers forced their way into the Supreme Court building, where the judges were believed to be taking shelter. Several countries, meanwhile, including the United States, as well as some human rights groups, have urged the Maldives government to adhere to the Supreme Court's ruling and respect the rule of law. The United Kingdom, China and India have all issued travel warnings to the island nation amid the political unrest. The disgraced former USA gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar has been sentenced to an additional 40 to 125 years in prison for sexually assaulting young athletes under the guise of medical treatment. Monday's ruling by a Michigan court added to the 40 to 175-year sentence handed down to him last month. The 54-year-old is also facing a 60-year federal term for child pornography charges. Monday's trial capped weeks of harrowing accounts from more than 265 victims about his decades of abuse. The prime surviving suspect in the 2015 Islamic State attacks in Paris is refusing to answer questions as he appeared in court in Brussels on Monday for the first time in his first public appearance since his capture nearly 2 years ago. Salah Abdeslam is on trial for attempted murder charges for the police shooting that led to his arrest. He urged the court not to pander to Muslim prejudice, adding that his silence did not make him a criminal. The attacks in November 2015 killed at least 130 people.
Good morning. It's even colder than yesterday. Cold wave alerts are in place across much of the country. Be sure to dress even warmer than yesterday. Meanwhile, parts of the Jeollado region's Jeju and easternmost islands are still under heavy snow alerts, but the rest are dealing with frosty air with dry weather alerts. And as for today's freezing afternoon highs, Seoul will only make it to -6 degrees Celsius. Daegu and Gwangju will rise to -3 degrees this afternoon. Now, this cold snap will ease starting Thursday, with highs finally bouncing back to positive territory. And as for the weather outlook in PyeongChang, a colder Tuesday is in the forecast under mostly sunny skies, so you'll need to cover up from head to toe. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. While the brutally cold weather freezes most regions in South Korea, many areas in North Korea are having even colder conditions, with lows nearing -30 degrees this morning. And as for the rest of Asia, Tokyo had sub-zero morning lows on Tuesday, and afternoon highs will rise fast along with mostly sunny skies. Meanwhile, the heat wave due as summer makes come back following brief cool spell in Melbourne. Expect to see highs rising up to mid-30s on Wednesday. Heading to North America, a winter storm is expected to hit the Chicago area on Monday evening. making travel difficult as wind chills drop below zero. More than 400 flights were cancelled at O'Hare and Midway airports, but the snow will let up on Tuesday. And as for South America, Bogota and Rio de Janeiro will have another rainy day. Taking you to Europe, record snowfall and freezing temperatures have gripped Moscow, knocking down thousands of trees. And expect to see snow letting up, but freezing air remains. Lastly, to Africa, Algiers will have a rainy Tuesday. And that's all the weather update for now.
And that's where we're going to leave the news for now as well. Our next bulletin is coming up at noon Korea time in around an hour and a half from now. So until then, goodbye.